friends here. So I'm Christophe, I'm a former broadcaster, I'm a friend of Jules, Borkent from Nickelodeon, of lovely Jackie Edwards from the BBC and Adina Pitt from Cartoon Network. Thank you very much. All these three guys are not just broadcasters, they're part also of the advisory board of Mipjunior. So they're very clever. Yes, they have some production money and you can pitch your show after that, but they're also very clever. And we prepared this little discussion, and if it's very boring, we'll stop after 10 minutes. But basically, I asked them to think, obviously they'll tell us what they need now, what are they looking for, what's a priority, but also where we might be a bit later on. And I'll start with my favorite blonde, Jules. Darling.
Not that blonde anymore, slightly more
Well, you're
grey.
the only blonde one here, don't worry.
Exactly. When you first knew me, I was very blonde, but now I'm not, and I'm grey. But yeah, so Nickelodeon, for those of you who've been around, we've been around for many years internationally, almost 25 years now, and within the US more than 30 years. So you know what we look for. We're looking for comedy. Broad comedy is as part of our DNA. We're looking at all genres, which is preschool, live action and animation. And I think the question really for us is like, what has changed sort of over the last couple of years and what we feel the future is going to be like. And we talked about it a little bit before, and I've also talked sort of to my group and my team. And we really, for us, it is about figuring out the desire for more and more content than we are currently producing and how we can do that in a sort of real practical way. We don't have unlimited budgets. We have good budgets, but they have to stretch further and further. And for us, that's really been about figuring out the best partnerships we can do. And that could be partnerships from anything. That could be partnerships on wholly owned content. That could be partnerships where we share the content. And it could be across acquisitions. And I think what I've really seen in the last couple of years happening within our organization is that has become far more forefront to how we look at content, also on a global level and not so much on just an international level.
And so it's partnerships with like independent producers, obviously, but who else? I mean, who is interesting for you to look at?
We've partnered with Spin Master on Paw Patrol, which is one of our biggest hits. We've partnered with production companies in smaller markets. We worked with Blooming Media in Amsterdam on a show that Hunter Street that went worldwide. So it's everybody from independent producers to studios to other partners.
And Netflix, Amazon, good options?
Netflix, not so much, not that we wouldn't work with Netflix, but as a partner, that's a little bit more tricky. I'm not saying it would never happen, because who knows, the world is changing fast around us. We are working with partners that probably 5 years ago we wouldn't necessarily jump at. That has changed, and I think for everybody that is definitely, everything is sort of open for us. If Netflix came to us with a great idea to partner with us on something, we wouldn't definitely hear them out, and I think vice versa, I hope they would do the same.
And I mean, obviously, SVOD is really growing very, very fast. Do you think in 5 years' time you'll have still all your channels, or some of them might be optional because you can deal with the VOD way?
For me,
get in touch with the kids, yes.
I think the linear channels. Everybody always keeps saying linear is there to stay, which I think there is. The way it's there to stay, I think, is a question of what those channels will look like. But absolutely, we did some research at Viacom recently where we looked at use of TV, and for kids, what is the number one mode to access content, and TV is still number one by over 65% of kids still think TV is the easiest model. I think for us it's about the other platforms not just being complementary, sometimes instead of a channel. That could happen in certain markets. We see in markets like Scandinavia, VOD is growing so incredibly fast, but I still really feel strongly that a linear service that sort of serves up the best of what the network has to offer to an audience is still absolutely something I don't see going away anytime soon.
But even in the older element of your target, like what about the tweens? How do you address them mostly? Where do you see yourself in the future, making these guys part of your remit?
Well, where I see myself in the future is probably not quite, but where I see
I'm talking about Nickelodeon, darling, yes.
Yeah,
you are my favorite blonde, but it's not only about you.
Hopefully, no, I know it's not just about me, but hopefully for us, the teens, we are still our live action is still addressing a large audience of teens and younger teens. So we've been incredibly successful for years with our sitcoms coming from Los Angeles, from the States, with our telenovelas coming out of Latin America. And I think that content I think what we are offering up is probably the serialized content we really have seen has proven to be a great hit with that audience, and I think we're continuing to do so. With the recent acquisition of over a year ago from Telefe in Argentina, we have now basically got an apparatus around us that produces that content at great volumes and at great, very good costs. So I feel that still is there. And yes, VOD, whether it's via an app, whether it's via an SVOD service, we don't know what the future will bring, but I think that definitely is something. All those services hopefully will be complementary to each other. What is different is that we have to really think when producing content for Nick, and I think for my esteemed colleagues next to me, it is about where in the past we would probably say we want to be everywhere where kids are, we'll make a piece of content, we'll put it everywhere where kids are, and I think that is changing. That is now shifting, and that not all content is right for every single platform. So that actually is the opportunity for a lot of the people in this room, is the type of content we're looking for. While we still continue to look for 11 minutes animation and a half-hour live action, there's other pieces of content that are now also on their own are important, and they're not all necessarily going to transform from one platform to the other. They might just stay on the app or on the VOD service or on the linear channel and not transfer.
Okay.
But over to the lady.
Cool. So lovely, Jackie. Let's speak Welsh.
It's over, right? Let's speak Welsh.
Yeah. So, darling, to answer that question very quickly, will TV survive?
I do believe TV will survive, and this is our Gloria Gaynor moment. Television has a lot to offer children, and it still is proven by the point that most children are still watching content on television. And the fact of the matter is they love character, they love story, and television is a showcase for the very best of it. And I think what will happen in the future is channels will still endure, particularly in the preschool area. But for older kids, it will still endure, and children might be consuming the same content in other places, on VOD platforms, possibly on YouTube. So I think TV will survive, but Jules, as you were saying, there is an absolute need for us to respond to children's changing habits and be thoughtful and very specific about making different additional content for different platforms to be where they are and keep on pointing back. It's a circle of goodness we have to perpetuate for ourselves to survive. TV would be first and foremost, but we've got to respond to the audience's changing habits, and we do. BBC Children's, we now have a digital commissioning round twice a year, and we look for content that's sort of specifically for our non-channel outlets. So it's a new process, and it's throwing up some really exciting content.
So today your priority in terms of content, in terms of like age, animation, live action, what is it today, and what might be different, do you think, you anticipate maybe in 5 years' time?
Well, as Alice was saying earlier, our primary pocket of money is spent on commissioned content which reflects the lives of UK audiences. Our acquisitions bit, our current needs are pretty much as they always were for CBeebies, the 0 to 6 channel, which is the UK's premier children's service. We use our acquisitions money to pre-buy animation so we can tailor it in a bespoke way to the audience. So we have brands like Hey Dougie and Bing and the Octonauts, and there's great, much-loved shows on the children's services. For older kids, that's a kind of more interesting piece for us, because we've got quite a mixed bag of asks and requirements. We buy animation, we buy drama, we pre-buy, we buy off the shelf, and we're looking at content from 6 to 16 years of age, and that's quite the broad sweep. And then we're looking at where we're buying for as well now, more and more. Certainly for the older end, we're looking for content that probably won't sit on the CBBC channel, because tonally it'll be a little bit sort of squeaky for some of our audience. So we're buying specifically for our VOD service, the iPlayer.
And what is the biggest hit there right now for this older part of the audience?
There's a lot of new teen drama just gone online, so that's early days, but we've got a show that we acquired from Australia, went on at the beginning of this year, called Mustangs FC, which is about a really terrible girls' soccer team. And it's really, really funny. And we had my favourite ever letter of complaint about that show, which was from a dad. And he said, my daughter's been watching this show, and she's just watched the episode where somebody explains what mansplaining is, and she looks at me differently now. And So I love shows like that. It's sort of...
So what was your answer, darling?
You know, we've had that conversation before, Christophe. So great shows. I mean, that's sort of slightly, it feels slightly older tonally than our normal CBBC fare, but we have played it on the channel, and it's been a roaring success and loved by girls and boys. So that's a nice one.
Cool. So we come now to the princess of animation, darling, Adina. So my lovely Adina.
Okay.
So, why not? Or do you want me another one? Contest from Puerto Rico?
Fine.
Okay, fine.
That I'll take.
Cool. So what about you? So what's your priority today? What do you think you need to do, like, leading this market? Apart from all the duties we know you're doing, we're so fabulously connected, but also the content now, and what will change, you think?
Well, I think that Jules and Jackie covered a lot of things
so
that I would like to, so I think we're done. No, but one of the things that I wanted to touch upon, I mean, look, we all have very brand-specific targets that we want to hit, and, you know, at Cartoon Network and Boomerang, we have a pretty vast ecosystem, so very similar to my colleagues, you know, we're looking for content that we can give our consumer. You know, we're very focused on what the consumer wants and consumer behavior, which we've talked about at length about how that has shifted. And so we're very mindful of that. But one of the things that we're very, very focused on is also building brands and building franchises. And so when we're at the market, it's not just looking for new partnerships and experimenting with conversations about new models, which I think is very important for both sides of the table to be thinking about. But also, you know, again, staying true to our brand and finding things that we think can be brands of the future that can sit alongside our very vast library of originals, which are still at the core of who we all are.
Could you give an example of today on one of the things you're doing, one of the shows you're developing or co-helping?
Sure. So we recently launched, at Cartoon Network US, we launched a show called Total Dramarama. And that actually came from a conversation with the folks at both Cake and Fresh, with whom we partnered on, I think it was, goodness, 6 or 7 seasons of the original Total Drama. And that had been several years ago. And so we went back to them and said, we really love that brand. And is there a narrative that we can use, that we can not do the same show, not do a season 8, but maybe age the kids down, put them in a different setting? What would that look like? And they came up with this concept, and, you know, we're really pleased with that. So I think the lesson that we learned in that is it's so important to also go back to those relationships that you have and take a look at that IP that maybe worked for you at one point and see, is there a retooling of that? It's not just a reboot, it's a real, you know, reimagination of something, and can you make it relevant to an audience?
So moving forward, so really like working on big IPs that really work 360 kind of strong things. Any kind of other paradigm shifting or disruption?
Well, look, of course, there's just a lot of competition. Companies are buying companies, and there's just so much choice. If I showed you the inventory grids that we have on what the global landscape looks like for kids, it's overwhelming. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but...
Not yet.
What was the question again?
Like another, what do you think, like, okay, doing a big IP,
another.
And so another really big difference that might happen in the next 5 years. Okay, I'll give you another hint. So you've been very successful with Lego.
Yes.
Right, and Jules started about cooperation. So any kind of idea, whom else you could work with, that who do you think like you can pitch now? Some other kind of completely from another field people could come, like more video games, for instance, or something else.
Oh, sure. I mean, look, we are open to partnering with all kinds of companies. We're not limited to one profile. So absolutely. I mean, we are as proactive as we can be in that space, but we also invite people to come to us with new ideas. And also remember, we're a global company, and so great ideas come from all over the world. We're open for business. Many of our acquired shows actually don't come from the US. So being in the international marketplace and working with our sister channels is something that's really important to us. A good idea can come from anywhere.
Yes, they can. We have another very Germanic, so 25 minutes. If anyone has a big urgent question now, you can start asking. I mean, if you want. I have a very limited brain, and oh no, I see. Yeah. You want to? There's a mic also in the room, so to just say who you are, and you can ask the questions. But so, anyone, Jules or Jackie, do you want to react on that? On what is happening in different part of the world? Like what's happening in how do you deal with China, for instance?
Well, China is a great new
country of honor of Mipjunior.
It's the country of honor of Mipjunior, but it's also a great opportunity for new collaborations, and I don't know anybody that's not looking in that direction for ideas to work together on. And we're the same, and we have lots and lots of lovely new colleagues and friends we speak to there all the time. And, it is a global industry, and I think that in the future, that's going to be everybody's challenge, is when everything is everywhere and everybody's got quite similar content and there's so much content in so many different platforms, how are you going to stand out? And while we're a global business, and I think sometimes localization and distinctiveness and retaining some sort of distinctiveness, and I think as a public service broadcaster, I think that's the thing that's going to save us.
Do you still, there will still be also...
Words.
So there'll still also be a public broadcaster in most countries in the future?
I absolutely believe that with all my heart. I mean, I'm really proud to work with the BBC, and I've never made any sort of secret of that, because I do think it's a fantastic organisation. And I think that intention of having public money to preserve your cultural identity as a country, and also offer an opportunity to see the children of your country reflected back to them in programming, is fantastic, and that will keep us distinctive and keep us a very different offer to anybody else. And why we've always got a mixed output in different genres and different styles and techniques. Ultimately, everything we do has got a public service heart to it. Even our animation that we sort of buy in, it's doing something special and different for our audience. It's got something embedded in it that is public service to the core.
Yes, Jules.
For China, well, we are actually working with iQIYI in China, which is sort of the YouTube of China. It's a big portal there, and we've started, we're actually in a production on a show with them there, which has been a really, really good experience for us. And it's everybody's always, how do you crack China and how do you do it? And it became actually a very organic process. It was just a very simple idea that came to us, they asked to work with us on, and we have sort of really been able to marry the expertise in China with our sort of, for lack of a better word, Western expertise, and really married them together and working on a show that way. And that has really been sort of from now, that's like looking like a really great, it's going to have a really great result for us, so we're super happy with that. And on other markets, it is sort of, as I said earlier, really a combination of the way the partnerships are put together, and sort of with my team in New York and London, we have Nina Hahn, who runs all of production development.
Hi, Nina.
Hi, Nina. And Leila Lewis, who runs all of the acquisitions for both domestic and international. We really have a very strong team that is out there always sort of finding the best models possible, and their worlds could often very much overlap in that a lot of our acquired content actually then also rolls into the development world, because we do bring a lot to the table there. And that is, I think, for us always been the model, and we've seen really recent real successes with that, which shows that we've classic like Baba Papa that we've acquired and working on. So we're working to both Leila and Nina working on these shows sort of very much in hand. And I think that for us, how we sort of, really come for Nickelodeon, it's become absolutely sort of almost irrelevant how the show comes into the house. It's, well, as I said, wholly owned, part owned, co-pro, bought, limited rights, full rights. There's many, many, many different opportunities. So that is it on that. And then on the other part is where we are sort of really focusing as well, sort of on digital studios, which the Viacom International Digital Studios based in London. And it's sort of a virtual studio, so we have other versions of it around the world, and that is really focusing very much on short-form creation, native short-form creation, both for YouTube. We just did a show with Jojo Siwa, the girl with...
Just live action only?
That's animation. The Jojo Bobo show, I think it's called, is Jojo Siwa, who we all know with our lovely bows, and her dog Bobo, and they have their own show on YouTube. So we are doing different types of content. And actually, interestingly enough, a lot of that content we now get asked, can we use it for other platforms? And we sort of make it natively for YouTube. Mm-hmm. And now we're sort of slowly looking at what we can do with that content as well.
And so being a YouTube show, and so finance with advertising, do you think also the cooperation with the big brands, I'm not talking about kids, but really consumer brands is also an option in the future. You'll have to work with, like, I don't know.
Give an example.
Okay, she works with Lego, and it's
Oh,
very
I see.
successful.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Well, we work with
He
Spin.
works with Spin Master.
We were Spin Master.
So do
We
we,
did with
you know.
Spin. So we are with toy partners. Yeah, toy partners. We have worked with Hasbro, with Mattel. We're working with all the partners.
Because on the teen or tween level, there's a big brand world that's open there for grab. I mean, they have interest in content, in money, and direct contact with tweens. So there could be also something on YouTube.
We have absolutely changed our model in more ways that I thought. I've been in this job sort of for quite a long time, and I really have felt over the last sort of 3 to 4 years a real sea change happening sort of within our organization, and I think in all our organizations what is happening, sort of how we are. Frankly, in the past it was just sort of, well, there was cartoon, there was Disney, and there was us, and then there were the public broadcasters, and we sort of have sort of a bit of a level playing field, and we battled it out a bit, and sometimes they got a show, and sometimes we got a show, and that has just with all the research, the other platforms, that has been completely broken up. And now it's fascinating. Sometimes it's very tiring, because negotiating a deal is taking a lot longer than it used to be so simple in the good old days when we walked around with VHS tapes and were doing Mipjunior that way. All that is long but a distant memory. And I think while it is challenging at times, it also is really exciting, because there is just so much more to choose from and so much more to look at. And for creators, there are so many more opportunities to get out there. We've always heard, like, we were probably a little bit more closed off in the past of how much content from outside we would bring in, because we'd had our own studios, and you have shows coming in like Peppa Pig that then sort of become part of our DNA, etc. But other than that, I think that if you look at our landscape now and where it was 5 years ago, it is very, very different. And to your very earlier question, where we're going to be in 5 years' time, I think it's going to be very different again. There's probably some of the players will fall away, or they might focus less on kids. There might be more consolidation. Who knows? We might all be working together, these 3 companies, in some shape or form on kids. We don't know that, but I think that is where we're seeing it in the industry. Consolidation is happening for more and more, and that probably something similar with kids. You already see it happening.
Can I just address one thing, because I'm glad you brought it up, talking about the relationship between the studios and the third-party acquisitions teams. That's a really important point, an important note, because one of the things that shifted in our model, it's very rare, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very rare that we have an opportunity to pick up a show that is fully produced. It's much, much better, more often than not, if the idea is presented to us, no matter where it's coming from, early enough that we can then partner with the development team. So I think that's a really important note. It's not easy to take a show and just reversion it into another language, and that is culturally different, maybe not as relevant, or the storytelling mechanisms are challenging. It's very difficult to reversion things and expect it to work with a particular audience. So more often than not, I would say to people who are out here looking for new partnerships, less sometimes is more for us, because we can help shape that if it's something that we feel is right for our brands.
I think that's true. It's the same with us. I mean, CBeebies, for the last 4 years, I think everything's exclusively been a pre-buy, but more and more with CBBC, we're getting involved early in shows, whether people like it or not. But I think it's really important. So, you've got your sort of brand fingerprint on it, whether it's Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, or the BBC. There's a little flavour of you in there as well, which makes it more relevant to the audience and gets a better connection.
What does happen, though, with live, somehow disagreeing with Adina somewhat around live action, where I do feel, and you see it on all the platforms, that it started with adults and Swedish and Danish crime dramas in the UK and becoming very popular, and either be remade or actually the original version doing better than the remade version. And I think what we're seeing a lot is sort of, we have been testing the waters sort of with the telenovela. Can we run telenovelas made in Latin America? We can't run them everywhere, but we can run them in a number of markets, and Disney has been able to do it. We've been able to do it. So that's some of the live action genres I think are opening up more. Like Hunter Street was a show with an English family living in Amsterdam, while some of our audience probably didn't know where it was filmed, and they thought it might have been somewhere in Canada or in America because they don't know Amsterdam. There is absolutely sort of an opening up, I think, of other cultures, and what kids are experiencing now through the platforms that they have at their disposal. They just see a lot more those other cultures. I think in animation, and I agree with Adina, some of the writing is very specific to certain markets, and that's also what we're working on with some of our international markets where we are producing animation. How can we make that content more broad appeal to a global audience? And that normally has to do with either writing or sort of the way the pacing works. But generally, I think where it's interesting for us is really where live action is sort of opening up. That door has really opened up to have it either. We just bought Bureau of Magical Things in Australia. It has a global feel to it. It's definitely filmed in Australia, but I think the storytelling sort of is really what drives the popularity of those shows. But that poor gentleman was going to ask a question, and we still haven't gotten to him.
I'm quite enjoying our little fireplace. Ignore them. No, just joking. Yeah, he will ask his question. We know him. He's all right. He can wait 1 second more. And don't pitch your next show, darling. Don't do that. So yes, Jackie, you wanted to answer to Jules?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask Jules a question.
Oh, do.
Jules, hello.
Don't ask me a question.
Do you know your telenovelas, do you produce Spanish and English language versions concurrently? Because BBC Wales have done it quite successfully with a number of dramas.
Not quite. So what we do is we do a version of what we have done to date is we have produced, whether it's a telenovela, which is a 61-hour series, which is not what we produce, and we would then use the story and make an American version of the same show, but it's a reduced version. It could be 20, it could be 30, it could be 40 half hours. So we condense the story somewhat. It's still the same story. It's still sometimes could be part of the same cast. It's definitely on the same location, same set. So that is what we have done. We are actually sort of exploring, is there a way of doing a dual, can you film it twice? Or would you film a telenovela in English? And there's a lot of other ways to think about that format. It's a tricky format we're currently dubbing it. We're dubbing the show, so we're using it in Italy, Spain, France, and mainly European markets. That's where we're working on it. But it's absolutely something that we have done, but not quite the way you just asked. So it is a version thereof.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, little Andrew, what is your question? So who are you?
First of all, Christophe, you better get me my name right. Francis.
Francis Fitzpatrick.
That's it. Now we're sucking diesel, as they say in Ireland. First of all, can I compliment you and your 3 colleagues on how well you've worn over the years? If we compare you to your pictures.
Well, the thing that won't change in 5 years is my headshot.
That picture is 2 years ago.
I love it. Adina is very sweet because Adina is really like coming from out of space.
Presenting the weather.
You're coming from out of space on your picture, darling.
They keep asking me to take a new headshot, and I keep saying no because when you look at me there, I look very young.
I know.
And
yeah,
I
but you also look like directly from Mars.
Well, thank you.
Can I make a confession? Mine is actually from the last century.
Mine is 2 years ago. So
and me is Annecy last year, darling. Have slip in the fridge, that's all.
Well, I just...
Okay.
Looks great.
Okay, next question.
Next question. Well, I haven't even had my first, so... just in terms of and I'm not allowed to pitch, but we had a 7-time Emmy Award-winning series called Jakers that the BBC very kindly bought as an acquisition. And life was a lot easier then, as Jules pointed out. Now, the BBC are not buying our next series, but that's it's a free market.
Jackie.
Same with me. She also said no to my last series, but that's all right. I still love her.
The BBC are doing a fabulous job because as a parent, what they're doing, I absolutely love the BBC for my kids. I've got 6.
So what's your question?
Thank you, Christophe. Eventually bringing me back on track.
I love you too. What's your question?
But you kept me waiting so long. I feel like the uninvited guest here.
Cool.
Anyway, my question is finally, 5 years' time, the kids will move to the new media. So Jules was saying it's around 65% migration. 65% still watching linear TV. So the new funding models, what are they? Are they joining with Lego? Are they joining with sort of Hasbro? And just maybe a little bit of time on that, just to forecast what it will be.
Just what I said, by the way, 65% say that TV is the easiest medium to find content. I didn't say 65% is watching TV, so I just want to clarify that.
It is depending on the territories, and the last figures, for instance, for France Télévisions, has been asked France 4 to go into online in 2020. Actually, there's still 80% entering through TV on content for 4 to 14 in France. So it is still the favorite media.
I'd say for preschool particularly, TV will endure for a very long time. Particularly, channels like CBeebies, where we do offer a safe space.
Yeah.
It's a trusted platform, and parents like their children watching it. It's advertising free. It's good, wholesome content, and I think there's going to be a want and a need for that, particularly when the digital world can feel like the Wild West at sometimes, and a lot of it is unregulated, and there's a bit of a void in terms of safety and things like that. So those platforms will endure.
So in terms of financing, because little Francis with 6 kids asked about the financing of the shows.
Well, look, I think the financing of shows is a conversation that has been evolving. Every year we have this conversation, right? Sometimes our budgets are cut. Sometimes we have an abundance. And it really forces us to rethink. There's certain things that we need, and we have to make those budgets work. I would say to you, from where I'm sitting today, one of the things that I think is going to be very important for us is having a scope of rights for whatever it is we make or acquire. And what that means is it could mean that the model shifts because maybe we have to pay more and pick up less, or maybe not. It depends on what you come to the table with, too. I think that a lot of times people come to the network expecting us, it doesn't happen very often, but expecting us to kind of do that math for you. We know what our budgets are, what we think through, and I don't want to speak for both of you, but certainly, we have different models. We have co-production models, we have acquired models, we have pre-buy models. Each one of those is different. So when you come to us with an idea, we will ask you those questions, so that we ask you, what's your budget? What do you bring to the table? In other words, do you have some financing in place? And we figure it out together. I don't think that that's going to shift extraordinarily in the future. I think it's going to be a continuation of that. It's just a matter of the what. What is the thing that we're partnering on? Is it a 50-50? Is it 20%? Is it just a straight acquisition? It could be a number of things.
But because of the stretching, because you have to do more platforms, different. Do you expect, or would you like the producers to come with a bit of the budget already there, or that's?
I think at least if you have a plan in your head, we always say to people, don't be afraid to partner with production and distribution companies, because they come to the table with an understanding of what the global marketplace can tolerate and whether or not you can monetize that thing that you're making. And certainly we do a lot of business with them, so there's a bit of a turnkey approach. But, we joke around a lot that for the last several years, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, not any deal looks like the other. In fact, even the programming that we have acquired from the same companies, the deals look very different. And it's all predicated on the what.
Good. So we don't know where we go. That's the answer to me. Sorry, it's open.
I think
very
anything's
open.
possible. Anything's possible.
Anything is possible. It's better. Thanks, Jackie. So do we have another question? We have another 7 German minutes. That means we'll stop in 7 minutes. No?
Yeah, I have a question over here. My name is Anand Banwari. Over here.
Stand up.
I'm waving out here.
Yeah, I can see.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
All right. The world's getting global and it's getting very local. How are we dealing with that?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I mean, Francis, you are right, but that's a very good question.
The world
In terms of creativity and in terms of business models.
Local, global. How does that, for a producer, I mean, they have this very UK show, so that's good for Jackie, but he also wants, because he will only get 30% of the budget, he deals with global platform, so how does he deal with local and global appeal?
Yeah. For us, that mainly sits sort of, again, sorry, I sound like a broken record, but it sits around the live action space where that's probably the most relevant. I feel animation does travel by nature more easily. Preschool, if it's not animation, if it's live action preschool, is a little bit more challenging to travel. So that probably, I would say, not so ideal for us. But on the live action front, I think we have shown.
So it needs to travel. I mean, for Nick, I can't do something for Nick
not
France.
Necessarily.
Nick US.
If you want to do something for Nick US, that's a little bit of a different ballgame because it's a much. But if you say, I'm making it up, you want to make something for Nickelodeon Germany, That's right, for Nickelodeon Germany. We just did that. We did a show called Spotlight, which is a live-action show. We did 90 episodes of that. It's a great show that actually originated in Holland. Then we created another version for Germany, and we are now looking at, can we use that version? Would that be something that would be suitable elsewhere? And so we feel you can absolutely, if you produce it well, and if it's produced to a certain, it will absolutely have the local relevance, but if the storytelling lends itself to export, absolutely. And that sort of goes back to what I said earlier. I think exporting these live action formats has become more easier. Within animation, I think, as I said, it's probably easier depending on the genre, and if it fits our brand ethos, then fine. And then preschool, I think we're doing all genres. Like we're doing an animated series in the UK, so Cartoon has done that. We are doing preschool everywhere around the world. So we're making animation in Singapore, we're making live action in Argentina, and we're doing it in Australia. So it is sort of become like it. We know what for us will work, and we have taken, as I said earlier, shows that probably would not have worked so well 5 years ago. And if you go back as far as 10 years, then nobody said live action is ever going to work, and it's all going to be about animation, and really live action doesn't work, and that has proven not to be true. So I think it absolutely can travel, and local content absolutely can have a global appeal.
I think it also, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with that brand? You know, we've had pitches where people tell us it's the #1 show in a particular region, and that's fantastic, but we might decide that may not work for us as is. So you have to really ask yourself when you're making something, where do I see this? If I look at a map of the world, what are the priority places? But very similar to Jules, you know, we are very mindful that we have channels all over the world, and there are kids with different tastes, and we have to be there for those kids. So sometimes there are things that will be featured on some of our brands around the world, but not globally.
Yeah, can I interrupt? You know,
Sure.
Can I interrupt? I'm speaking still here. So we have.
You're freaking us out because you're sitting down and we can't
We don't
see
see-
you.
I
and
can't.
it's-
I have a bit of a back problem, so I can't stand up.
This is the voice in the back.
Yeah. All right. So we have a show called Chota Bheem in India. It required a Netflix to take the property and take it global. They're producing it for the world now. So whereas the traditional channels are thinking the old world style, whether it will travel, but Netflix has said it will travel, and they're taking the punt.
So the question is, would we do that, or is it?
Yeah. I mean, from India, and that's from India. And they're working with
I
an
don't
Indian
know the
studio. None of the
show,
US
so-
studios would really work closely and take an Indian product and try to take it international. None of you all would do it. I'm
Right,
sorry.
I
to say
get the
that.
question. I understand the question. Yes. So you're saying Netflix picked up your show and they're
Putting it
taking
around
the
the
punt of
world.
it and they're putting it on a global platform. Well, we are a global platform similar to Netflix. We're Cartoon is to BBC to an extent also has a lot of channels globally. So absolutely, yeah. I think there is no reason, depending on the show, to pick up a show in India and put it globally. We have a great team in India that we currently are working on a show with throughout the production development group on one of the animated series that we want to really take fully globally. So our normal approach would that be is we probably have a little bit more of a hands-on approach in the production of a series. We don't just say, let's pick it up and we'll throw it out there and we'll see if it sticks. I think for Nickelodeon, it has been important to be part of the creative process, and that's how we come in. So in answer to your question, yes, we would pick up a show from India, and depending if it would be right for us, and I feel we do take risks at times where we don't really just expect it to be a global hit, but that is sort of what we have to do now. We have to take some risks, and we keep continuing to do so. And as far as India is concerned, yes, absolutely.
And it's a bit of difference between pay, I mean Netflix and free, because there's more ratings pressure here. So the risk taking from Netflix is easier, I would say.
Well, and also the way that the consumer interfaces with that is different to a linear experience or even our nonlinear ecosystem, because they could stack a whole season, right? But what we don't know is how long does that child stay there, and how do you build sustainability, and which is really important. When we talk about models, when we pick up volume, we are thinking, do we think it's going to live for multiple seasons, meaning several years? That's what it's in our heads. Can this be a franchise? It's not just one and done. So when we look at our ecosystem and rolling out new properties, it is a real exercise in, all right, we're going to drop this here, then we're going to go to linear, then we're going to go to VOD. We really look at it holistically to try to keep that viewer with that property and with our brand.
All right, thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Okay, maybe a last quick question? No? So if no, you're very shy people. So if not, so we don't know where we'll be in 5 years. Maybe we'll just do the Mipjunior through Skype. But
But did you know where you were 5 years ago ending up here? Did we know it then? We never know. We know what's going to be
we don't
next
know
year.
that. We'll have new pictures.
No,
No.
won't be us. We'll be somebody different.
They'll have merged and owned by Disney. And we'll thank you. We thank you very much with all your efforts, and thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. Have a good Mipjunior.